Let's give a go at plugging or pocket mounting of hardware. So I'm going to start with my fastener, take my fastener, make sure that it's appropriate in terms of its length and diameter for the cross section of the material. Select my drill bit for my pilot hole based on the width of the threads and the width of the shank. So again, I'll need a series of drill bits, one for the threads, one for the shank. And in this case, I want to pocket it or put it down in an opening that's below the height of the surface of the material. So an economic choice for making larger diameter holes will be something like this paddle bit or Forstner bit. Now it's important to remember that you're not just drilling that opening for the size of that lag screw, and you're not just doing it for the size of the washer, which is keeping that lag screw from getting buried down in the wood where it would be hard to extract. You're actually drilling that hole for the width of the driver that's going to be used to install that fastener. So let's go about that business. So I'm going to go ahead and mount my 3/4 inch paddle bit into my cordless drill. I'm going to have it set onto the drill setting for the maximum amount of power. I am going to come in on edge to find my mark and then raise it up into position. High speed, moderate pressure. Always stop the drill before you remove it when you're working with paddle bits. Now, I could have put a piece of tape or a mark with a Sharpie on that bit so that I could be consistently drilling to the same depth. I'm always going to start out drilling with my larger paddle bit and then stepping up to the shank next, just till I get through my first piece, and then last but not least, my pilot. And now I'm going to switch over to my driver. I'm going to change it from the drilling function over to the driving function, and I'm going to set the resistance for what is my best guess as to what is going to be the amount of torque required to get that fastener to grab securely without stripping out the threads or shearing the head off. It's also a good idea to clear that hole of any sawdust or debris, and that can be done by blowing it out with compressed air, a straw, or a piece of tubing. This is a magnetic bit holder, so that allows me to work hands-free and just like so. You heard the clutch engaged. That kept me from stripping out the threads or stripping the head of the screw. When you start to use larger lag bolts, I'm going to recommend that you always switch down into the low setting, which gives you the maximum amount of force that that tool has the capability of. Let's look at another mounting. I'm going to take a fixed length countersink, and it's stamped on here that this is a number 8 by 1.25 inches. Secure the bit in place. Set my clutch to drill and switch back to high speed. Flush to the surface, swap to a driver. that has the appropriate size driver point for the size of the screw that I'm working with. And again, magnetic bit holders make this job a lot easier. I'm going to move it back to my drive setting and take the clutch down to around 7. See how that feels. And there you can see that excess force resulted in the screw spinning, and that is doing little or nothing to hold that screw in place. So, this is why it's always important to do test in advance. So let's give it another go. And see if I can find that sweet spot for my clutch setting. So I was at 7. I'm going to take it down to 4. Still stripping out the screw, or the threads of the screw in the wood. I'm going to take it down to around 2. And there we have the success that we're looking for. It had enough torque to bring it flush to the surface, but not so much that it stripped out the screws. Let's look at a countersink that's designed for mounting below surface or for pocketing. Again, I'll set this back to drilling. You can see there's a series of steps indicated on this for flush, low pocket, or deep pocketing. And these are most typically used with a wooden plug or dowel over the top of that hole after we're done. So here we go. And again, you can see we've got a combination of the drilling for the pilot for the threads, the width of the shank, and the accommodation of the width of the head. This is for a number 6 screw. I'm going to go ahead and, got to remember to set that clutch back down. So that we don't strip out the screw. We also talked about combination countersinks that have both the countersink head and the ability to accommodate the shank and the threads all in one bit, because these bits are tapered. And again, they are specifically sized for distinct screws. The length of the screw is adjusted with an Allen key so that you can extend as much or as little of that pilot bit as is necessary. And now that I'm down to that number 4, I need to select a driver that is appropriate for the size of that number 4. So I'm going to take out this number 0. Set my clutch down to its lowest setting. Oh, actually, my mistake. This is a slot drive. In general, I don't recommend slot drives be driven with cordless tools because there's a predisposition for it sliding out of position, but it can be done with the right size tip for that particular screw and with little patience and practice. Voila. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce what are called hinge bits. And again, these hinge bits are sized specifically for different types of screws, and they're great for mounting face plates and hinges and hanging brackets like keyhole hangers. And the reason that these bits are so useful is that we need to drill a pilot hole for our screw that's appropriate for that screw, but these openings are so large on these hinges that the likelihood of me accurately drilling in the center is challenging, but it's aggravated by the fact that when the bit engages the wood, the grain of the wood can often grab the smaller bits and cause them to come off center. So the beauty of a hinge bit is that it has this collar that's spring-loaded so that it will self-center and maintain that center as you drill. So let's take a look at how that works. We'll go into more detail about flush mounting hanger brackets when we move into the next module. So it centers up, straight and clean. Centers up, straight and clean.